They say money can't buy happiness, but it can certainly destroy a family. My father was about to learn that the hard way, and I was going to be the one to teach him. The crystal chandeliers of the Montgomery estate cast fractured rainbows across the Italian marble floors as I stood in the doorway of my father's study, watching him sign away someone else's future. He didn't notice me. He never did unless there was something he needed. Victor Montgomery, the self-made billionaire, the man Forbes called the Wolf of Wall Street's smarter brother, sat behind his mahogany desk worth more than most people's houses, his silver pen dancing across legal documents with the casual indifference of a man who'd crushed 1,000 dreams before breakfast. "Sir, the Hendersons are willing to negotiate," his lawyer Preston said nervously, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "They're asking for just 3 more months to."
3 months.
My father's laugh was cold, mechanical. "Preston, I didn't build a $15 billion empire by giving people more time. The Hendersons had their chance. Foreclose on the property. I want that land by Friday."
I felt my jaw tighten.
The Hendersons were a family of 4 who'd owned a small bakery in downtown Seattle for 3 generations. My father wanted their corner lot for his newest high-rise development. He'd probably forgotten their names the moment after he'd ordered their destruction.
"Enjoying the show, Ethan?"
My father's voice cut through my thoughts without him even looking up from his papers. I stepped into the study, my designer shoes, gifts I never asked for, clicking against the floor. "Just wondering if there's anyone left in Seattle you haven't destroyed yet, Dad." Now he looked up, his steel-gray eyes meeting mine with that familiar mixture of disappointment and disdain. At 62, Victor Montgomery was still imposing, 6'3" with silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a custom Tom Ford suit that cost more than a new car. Everything about him screamed power, control, perfection. Everything except his son.
"Destroy."
He leaned back in his leather chair, a slight smirk playing at his lips. "I create opportunities, Ethan. I transform neighborhoods." "You destroy lives," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. "You take what people have built and turn it into another sterile glass tower with your name on it." My father stood, his full height meant to intimidate. It had worked when I was 8. At 28, I'd grown immune to his tactics. "Is there a reason you've interrupted my meeting, or are you just here to recite your usual naive idealism?" "I came to remind you about dinner tonight. Mom asked me to." "Your mother." He waved his hand dismissively. "Tell Catherine I'll be working late."
Again.
"Preston, let's continue this in the conference room." As they filed out, my father paused beside me, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You know, Ethan, one day you're going to have to decide what kind of man you want to be. A builder like me, or a dreamer like you've always been. Dreamers don't inherit empires." The door closed behind him, leaving me alone in a study filled with awards, accolades, and evidence of a man who'd conquered everything except his own humanity. That conversation, that single moment, was when I made my decision. I was going to disappear. 3 days later. "You're joking." My best friend Marcus stared at me across the table at our usual coffee shop, the kind of hipster place my father would never be caught dead in. "You're actually going to do this?" I took a sip of my black coffee, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. Outside the window, Seattle's perpetual drizzle painted everything in shades of gray. Perfect weather for a dramatic life change. "I'm not joking. I've been planning this for 6 months." Marcus ran a hand through his dark curls, his expression caught between admiration and concern. Marcus Chun had been my roommate at Stanford, the one person in my life who'd never cared about my last name or my father's money. He came from a middle-class family in San Francisco, worked 3 jobs to pay his tuition, and taught me more about real life than any of my Ivy League professors. "Okay, let me get this straight," Marcus said, leaning forward. "You're going to leave behind a trust fund worth, what? 50 million. 73 million, I corrected. As of last quarter."
Jesus Christ. He shook his head.
$73 million. You're going to leave that behind, cut off all contact with your family, and pretend to be, what?
Poor.
Not pretend, I said firmly. Actually be poor. Or at least, actually live like a normal person. Get a real job. Pay real rent. Struggle with real problems. You're insane. Probably, I admitted with a slight smile. But I'm also serious, Marcus. I've spent my entire life being Victor Montgomery's son. Everything handed to me. Every opportunity bought. Every mistake erased with a check. I don't even know who I am underneath all that privilege. Marcus studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face. This is about more than just your dad, isn't it?
I thought about Sarah.
Beautiful, brilliant Sarah Chun, Marcus's sister, the woman I'd fallen in love with 2 years ago. The woman who'd broken up with me 6 months later because, as she tearfully explained, she could never be sure if I loved her or if I was just another bored rich kid collecting experiences. Everyone in my life either wants something from me or judges me before they know me, I said quietly. Even the people I care about can't separate me from my father's money. I need to know what my life would look like without the Montgomery name attached to it.
And your father?
He's just going to let you walk away. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was a letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times, each version trying to explain the unexplainable. I'm leaving this for him. Along with my credit cards, my phone, my car keys, everything connected to his money. I've set up a new identity.
Ethan Mitchell.
No social media presence. No digital footprint connecting me to the Montgomery family. I've been setting up the framework for months. Where will you go?
Portland, I said.
Far enough to start fresh, close enough to not feel like I'm running away to another country. I've already secured a small apartment, a real apartment that I can actually afford on minimum wage. And I've got a job interview lined up at a coffee shop. Marcus let out a low whistle.
From mansion to coffee shop.
That's quite a downgrade. That's kind of the point. He was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. You know, I think you're crazy, right? But I also think I've never seen you this determined about anything in your life.
So I'm with you, man.
If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me.
Thank you. And Marcus? Don't tell Sarah. Not yet.
If she finds out and thinks this is some grand gesture to win her back.
Your secret's safe with me, he promised. But Ethan?
When you figure out who you really are out there, don't lose yourself completely. Some parts of you are worth keeping, rich or poor. That night, the Montgomery estate was silent except for the distant hum of the climate control system and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I stood in my childhood bedroom, a space larger than most studio apartments, filled with expensive furniture I'd never chosen and artwork I'd never appreciated. On my desk sat 3 envelopes. The first was addressed to my father. Inside, I'd written, Dad, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not gone in the sense that something's happened to me, but gone in the sense that I've chosen to leave. I know you won't understand this decision. Understanding has never been our strong suit as a family. I'm not running away from responsibility. I'm running toward it. I need to know who Ethan Montgomery is when he's not standing in Victor Montgomery's shadow. I need to earn something, fail at something, succeed at something, all on my own merit. I don't expect you to approve. I'm not asking for your permission or your blessing. I'm simply telling you that I'm taking control of my own life for the first time. Maybe someday you'll understand.
Maybe you won't.
Either way, this is something I have to do.
Ethan.
The second envelope was for my mother. That letter was longer, more emotional, filled with apologies and promises that I'd stay safe. Catherine Montgomery was a good woman trapped in a gilded cage, and I felt guilty leaving her alone with him. But I also knew that my staying wouldn't change anything for her. She'd made her choices long ago. The third envelope was for my younger sister, Olivia. She was only 16, still navigating the treacherous waters of being a Montgomery heir. I tried to prepare her for my absence, dropping hints over the past few weeks that I might need to find myself for a while. She'd rolled her eyes and called me dramatic, but I'd seen the worry in her expression.
Live.
Don't let him turn you into another weapon in his arsenal. You're better than that. You're better than all of this. Stay true to who you are, and don't let the money define you. I love you.
I'll be back someday.
Your dramatic big brother. I left the envelopes on my desk, took one last look around the room that had been my prison for 28 years, and walked out with nothing but a single backpack containing a few changes of clothes, my new identification as Ethan Mitchell, and exactly $300 in cash, money I'd saved from odd jobs I'd done over the past year without my father's knowledge. The night air was cool and damp as I walked down the circular driveway for the last time. Behind me, the Montgomery estate stood illuminated like a beacon of wealth and power. Ahead of me, the darkness of the unknown stretched infinitely. I chose the darkness. 1 week later, Portland, Oregon. The apartment smelled like mold and old carpet cleaner. It was a studio, if you could call 400 square feet of cramped space with a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge a studio. The bathroom had suspicious stains I chose not to investigate too closely, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. It was perfect. I'd spent my first week in Portland doing things I'd never done before: grocery shopping with an actual budget, using public transportation, cooking my own meals with ingredients that didn't cost more than most people's monthly rent. The Ethan Montgomery who'd grown up with a private chef and a driver would have been horrified. Ethan Mitchell found it liberating. My job interview at Morrison's Coffee and Books had gone better than expected. The owner, Helen Morrison, was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She'd looked over my carefully fabricated resume and asked me one question: why does someone with a degree in business from state want to work at a coffee shop for $11 an hour? I'd prepared for this. Because I need a fresh start, and I've always loved coffee shops. They're where people really connect, you know? No pretense, just life happening. She'd studied me for a long moment, then smiled.
You start Monday. 6 a.m. Don't be late.
So now, 1 week into my new life, I was learning to operate an espresso machine, memorizing complicated drink orders, and discovering muscles I didn't know I had from standing on my feet for 8-hour shifts. But the real shock came on my third day, when she walked in. I was in the middle of crafting a particularly complex caramel macchiato when I heard a familiar voice. Medium dark roast, please.
Black. My hands froze. My heart stopped. I looked up, and there she was. Sarah Chun.
She was even more beautiful than I remembered. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing scrubs that suggested she was on her way to or from a shift at a hospital. Her eyes were focused on her phone, scrolling through messages with the distracted air of someone with too much on their mind. She hadn't recognized me yet. Why would she? I'd cut my hair short, grown out a beard, and was wearing the kind of basic jeans and Morrison's Coffee t-shirt that screamed broke barista, rather than trust fund air. That'll be $2.50, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the thundering of my heart. Sarah looked up, and for a heart-stopping moment, our eyes met. I saw a flicker of something: recognition?
Confusion? Cross her face. Then it was gone.
Thanks, she said, handing me exact change. Her fingers brushed mine for the briefest moment, and I felt electricity shoot up my arm. I prepared her coffee with hands that I forced to stay steady, hyper-aware of her presence on the other side of the counter. When I handed her the cup, she smiled, a tired automatic smile, and turned to leave. Wait, I said before I could stop myself. She turned back, eyebrows raised.
Yes.
I scrambled for something to say, anything that wouldn't give me away.
You're in scrubs.
Medical professional. Nurse, she said, a hint of pride in her voice.
3rd year.
Working at Portland General. That's great, I said genuinely. This was new. When we'd been together, she'd been pre-med, talking about becoming a doctor. Nursing suits you. She tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made my palms sweat. Do I know you from somewhere? I just have one of those faces, I said quickly. People always think they know me. She didn't look convinced, but she was clearly too tired to pursue it. Well, thanks for the coffee.
Ethan, I supplied.
Ethan Mitchell. Sarah, she replied with another smile. I'll probably be seeing you around. This place is on my route to work. As the door closed behind her, I realized I was holding my breath. Marcus hadn't told her, I'd made him promise not to, but Sarah being in Portland, working at the same hospital where I knew Marcus had mentioned she'd been doing her residency. This wasn't part of the plan. This was going to be complicated.
2 weeks later.
True to her word, Sarah became a regular. She came in every morning at 6:45 a.m., ordered the same black coffee, and usually grabbed a muffin or a bagel to go. We developed a routine. I'd see her walk up, and I'd start preparing her order before she even reached the counter. You're getting good at this, she commented one morning, accepting her coffee with a genuine smile. Most baristas take at least a month to remember regular orders. I'm a fast learner, I said, which was true. I was also desperately trying not to stare at her like a lovesick puppy, which was significantly harder. So, Ethan Mitchell, she said, leaning against the counter. It was a slow morning, with only a handful of customers scattered throughout the shop. What's your story? You don't seem like the typical career barista.
My heart rate spiked.
What makes you say that? I don't know, she mused, her dark eyes studying me with an intensity that reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Sarah had always been perceptive, always able to see beneath surfaces. You carry yourself differently. The way you talk, the way you move. I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe I'm just good at making coffee, I deflected with a grin. Maybe, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe you're running from something. The words hit too close to home. Aren't we all running from something? Profound, she said with a laugh that made my chest ache. Okay, mysterious barista. Keep your secrets. I've got a 12-hour shift ahead of me, and I need all the caffeine I can get. As she left, Helen emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. That girl likes you, she observed with the bluntness of someone who'd seen too many workplace romances to sugarcoat anything. She's just a regular customer, I protested weakly. And I'm the Queen of England. Helen fixed me with a knowing look. Word of advice, kid? If you're interested, don't wait too long. Life's too short, and pretty nurses don't stay single for long. If only she knew how complicated the situation really was. That evening, I was closing up the shop. Helen had left early for a doctor's appointment, trusting me with the keys after only a month of work, when my burner phone rang. I had 2 phones, the burner for emergencies, and a cheap smartphone for regular use. Only 3 people had the burner number: Marcus, my mother, who'd extracted it from me before I left, and my lawyer, who was holding my trust fund in a sealed account until I decided what to do with it. The caller ID showed Marcus. Hey man, I answered, locking the front door. What's up? We need to talk. Marcus's voice was serious, without its usual humor. It's about your father. My stomach dropped. What about him? He's been looking for you. Hired private investigators, the works. He's convinced something happened to you, that you didn't leave voluntarily. That's ridiculous. I left him a letter explaining. Ethan, he's not accepting it. He's telling people you were kidnapped, that someone's holding you for ransom but hasn't made contact yet. He's got the FBI involved. I felt the blood drain from my face. The FBI? Marcus, this is insane. I'm a grown man who chose to leave. I know that and you know that, but your father. Marcus sighed heavily. He's not thinking clearly. Or maybe he's thinking too clearly. This whole thing is making him look sympathetic. Billionaire father desperately searching for missing son. It's all over the news in Seattle. Stock prices for Montgomery Enterprises have actually gone up because of the public sympathy. Of course. Even my disappearance became a business opportunity for Victor Montgomery. What do I do? I asked, my mind racing. I don't know, Marcus admitted. But here's the thing, Sarah knows. About the news, I mean. She asked me yesterday if I'd heard about Victor Montgomery's son going missing. I played dumb, but Ethan, she's smart. She's starting to put pieces together. My world tilted on its axis. Sarah knew Victor Montgomery had a missing son. She'd seen me, talked to me, sensed something familiar about me. How long before those pieces connected? I need more time, I said desperately. Just a little more time to figure out who I am without all of that. I'll cover for you as long as I can, Marcus promised. But Ethan? This can't last forever. Sooner or later, the truth is going to come out. And when it does, you better be ready for the consequences. After hanging up, I stood alone in the darkened coffee shop, surrounded by the ghosts of the life I'd left behind. I'd thought disappearing would be the hard part. I was beginning to realize that staying disappeared might be impossible. Especially with Sarah Chun as a regular customer. Especially with my father turning my absence into a media circus. Especially with my heart pulling me in directions I'd sworn I wouldn't go. Chapter 1 end. Little did I know that the next morning would change everything. A simple coffee order. A moment of recognition. And a secret that was about to explode in ways I could never have predicted. Because my father wasn't just looking for me, he was planning something that would force me out of hiding whether I was ready or not. And Sarah? Sarah was about to discover that the kind barista who made her morning coffee was connected to the biggest mystery in Seattle, and to her own past in ways neither of us had imagined. They say the truth will set you free, but sometimes the truth is a prison of its own making. I was about to discover that some secrets don't stay buried, they rise like ghosts, demanding to be acknowledged at the worst possible moment. The morning started like any other. I arrived at Morrison's Coffee and Books at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before my shift, because Helen had taught me that being on time meant being early. The Portland streets were still dark, slick with overnight rain, and the air carried the peculiar Pacific Northwest smell of wet concrete and pine trees. I went through my opening routine, grinding fresh beans, checking the pastry delivery, setting up the register. By 6:30 a.m., we had our usual morning rush, construction workers grabbing quick coffees, early commuters, students from Portland State University who'd been up all night cramming for exams. And then, at 6:47 a.m., 2 minutes later than usual, Sarah walked in. But she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, tall and handsome in that effortlessly polished way that came from good genetics and better grooming. He wore an expensive suit. I could tell from the cut, the fabric, the way it draped perfectly across his shoulders. Old Ethan would have recognized the brand. New Ethan pretended not to notice. But I noticed everything about how his hand rested possessively on Sarah's lower back. How she leaned into him slightly as they approached the counter. How they moved together with the easy synchronization of two people who'd been doing this dance for a while. "Good morning," I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral despite the leaden weight settling in my stomach.
"The usual, Sarah."
She looked up, and something in her expression made my breath catch. There was a question in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. "Actually," she said slowly, "make it 2 black coffees. And 2 of those blueberry muffins. Coming right up." I turned to prepare the order, hyper-aware of their presence on the other side of the counter. "This is the place I was telling you about," Sarah said to her companion. "Best coffee in this neighborhood, and the barista is," she paused, and I could feel her eyes on me. "Really good at what he does." "Looks like a dump," the man said dismissively, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone used to much finer things. "Sarah, we could go to that new place downtown, the one that won the—" "Derek, I like this place," Sarah interrupted, a note of steel in her voice. "Is that okay with you?"
Derek. So he had a name.
Derek, the handsome, well-dressed, obviously wealthy Derek who got to stand next to Sarah and touch her like he had the right to. I hated him instantly. "Whatever makes you happy, babe," Derek said, though his tone suggested he was merely humoring her. I set their coffees and muffins on the counter. "That'll be $12.50. Derek pulled out a black American Express card, the Centurion card, the one that required you to charge at least $250,000 annually and came with a $5,000 initiation fee. I knew because my father had one. I'd had one too, until I'd cut it up and left it on his desk. "Keep the change," Derek said carelessly, signing the receipt with an additional $20 tip that felt more like showing off than genuine generosity. As they turned to leave, Sarah paused and looked back at me. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the coffee shop fell away. It was just us, the same electric connection that had always existed between us, thrumming in the air like a live wire. Then Derek called her name, and the moment shattered. "See you tomorrow," Sarah said quietly, and something in her voice made me think she meant more than just ordering coffee. After they left, I stood frozen behind the counter until Helen's voice broke through my stupor. "Ex-girlfriend?" she asked, not unkindly. "Something like that," I muttered. "The heart wants what it wants," Helen said philosophically, patting my shoulder as she passed. "But sometimes what it wants is terrible for us.
Be careful, Ethan.
That girl's got complications written all over her." If only Helen knew that I was the biggest complication in Sarah's life, whether she realized it yet or not. That afternoon, my shift ended at 2 p.m., and I walked back to my apartment through streets that had finally dried out. Portland in October was a study in gray skies, gray buildings, gray moods. It matched my internal landscape perfectly. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my studio. The elevator had been broken since I moved in, unlocked my door, and stopped dead in my tracks. Someone had been in my apartment. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but I'd learned to be careful over the past month. I developed habits, routines, ways of leaving things that would tell me if someone had been snooping. The stack of mail on my counter was shifted slightly. The bathroom door I always left half open was now closed. And my laptop, the one item I'd kept from my old life, carefully scrubbed of any identifying information, was plugged in when I distinctly remembered unplugging it. My heart hammering, I did a quick sweep of the apartment. Nothing was missing. Nothing was obviously damaged. But someone had definitely been here.
The question was, who?
Private investigators working for my father? FBI agents following up on his missing person report? Or something else entirely? I was still trying to calm my racing thoughts when my burner phone buzzed with a text from Marcus.
"Call me. Now. Emergency."
I dialed immediately. Marcus picked up on the first ring. "Ethan, where are you?"
"My apartment."
"Why? What's wrong?"
"Get out. Now."
"Don't pack, don't grab anything, just get out." The urgency in his voice sent adrenaline flooding through my system. "Marcus, what's happening?" "Your father's PIs tracked down someone who saw you in Portland."
"They've got a photo, Ethan."
"A photo of you working at the coffee shop. They're sending people there right now, and if they find out where you live." I was already moving, grabbing my laptop, my burner phone, and the small amount of cash I kept hidden in a book. "How did they get a photo?"
"I don't know."
"Someone must have recognized you, Or maybe they just got lucky. But it's everywhere. Your father's team, the media, everyone's seen it. They're calling it a confirmed sighting, and they're descending on Portland as we speak. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my mind racing faster than my feet.
What about Sarah? Does she?
Ethan, Sarah's the one who saw the photo first. She called me 30 minutes ago, absolutely hysterical. She recognized you immediately. The world seemed to stop moving.
She knows.
She knows, Marcus confirmed grimly. And she's furious. She thinks you've been playing some kind of sick game, pretending not to know her, serving her coffee every morning like some kind of, I don't know, like some psychological manipulation. That's not, I didn't. I burst out onto the street, looking both ways for any sign of expensive cars or people who looked like they might be investigators. Marcus, I need to talk to her.
I need to explain.
She doesn't want to talk to you. Her exact words were, tell Ethan Montgomery that if I never see him again, it'll be too soon. Each word was a knife to the chest. Where is she now?
Working.
She's got a 12-hour shift at Portland General, started at noon. But Ethan, you can't go there. Your father's people are. I have to fix this, I said desperately. I have to make her understand.
Understand what?
That you've been lying to her for a month? That you pretended to be a broke barista while she poured her heart out to you about her struggles, her student loans, her, Jesus, Ethan, do you have any idea how betrayed she feels? I stopped walking, leaning against a brick wall, suddenly unable to catch my breath. Sarah had talked to me over the past month, really talked to me, in ways she never had when we were together before. She told me about her nursing school debt, about her difficult relationship with her parents who'd wanted her to be a doctor, about her fear that she'd never be able to afford to buy a house or start a family because of the crushing weight of her loans. And I'd listened, nodded sympathetically, shared my own carefully fabricated stories about struggling to make rent, about choosing between groceries and electricity bills.
I'd lied to her.
Every single day, I'd looked into her eyes and lied. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, I said weakly. I know, Marcus said, his voice softening slightly. But intentions don't matter much when you've hurt someone. Look, I've got to go, Sarah's calling me again. Stay off the grid for a few days, let things cool down.
And Ethan?
Figure out what you really want. Because you can't keep running from your life forever.
The line went dead.
I stood on a Portland street corner, homeless for the second time in my life, first by choice, now by necessity, and realized that my carefully constructed plan had fallen apart in the space of a single morning.
And the worst part?
I deserved every bit of it. 6 hours later. I'd spent the afternoon hiding in Powell's City of Books, the massive independent bookstore that occupied an entire city block. It was the perfect place to disappear. 9 color-coded rooms, thousands upon thousands of books, and enough foot traffic that one more person browsing the shelves wouldn't attract attention. I'd bought a cheap paperback and a coffee from their internal cafe, then settled into a corner of the gold room to think. My phone, the regular smartphone, not the burner, had been blowing up with notifications. I'd turned off most social media weeks ago, but I still had a news app that apparently couldn't resist sending me updates about myself. Montgomery heir found alive in Portland. Billionaire's son was working as a barista while family searched desperately. Victor Montgomery, I never stopped believing I'd find my boy. That last headline made me want to throw my phone across the room.
My boy.
Victor Montgomery had never called me his boy in my entire life. Every article painted him as the devoted father, desperate and heartbroken, while I became the troubled runaway, the ungrateful son who'd caused so much unnecessary pain. The media loved a good redemption story, and they were writing my father's masterpiece.
Around 7 p.m., my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number.
I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up.
Hello.
Mr. Montgomery. The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. My name is Jennifer Lawson. I'm a reporter with the Portland Tribune. I'd like to speak with you about your disappearance and...
I hung up immediately. The phone buzzed again. Different number. Ethan Montgomery?
This is Brad Fisher from Seattle News Network. We'd love to give you a chance to tell your side of the... I hung up again and turned off the phone entirely. They'd found my burner number. Which meant they'd found everything. There was no hiding anymore. No running. Whatever I'd hoped to accomplish by disappearing, by trying to live as Ethan Mitchell, was over before it had really begun. I needed to see Sarah. I needed to explain, to make her understand that I'd never meant to hurt her, that everything I'd felt during our conversations was real even if the circumstances weren't. But how do you apologize for a lie that all-encompassing? How do you ask someone to see past the deception to the truth underneath? I didn't have answers. But I knew I had to try. Portland General Hospital, 9:47 p.m. The hospital's emergency room was busy. It always was on Friday nights. I'd changed clothes in a Powell's bathroom, trading my Morrison's coffee shirt for a plain black hoodie I'd bought from a street vendor. I'd also picked up a surgical mask from a pharmacy, the kind people had gotten used to seeing during the pandemic and hadn't quite stopped wearing. It wasn't much of a disguise, but it might buy me a few minutes before someone recognized me. I approached the reception desk where a tired-looking woman in scrubs barely glanced up. "I need to speak with Nurse Chen," I said.
Sarah Chun. It's urgent. Are you family? We're friends. Please, it's important.
The receptionist studied me with the skeptical expression of someone who'd heard every excuse. "Sarah's in the middle of her shift. Unless you're dying, you'll need to wait until she's off duty." "When is that?"
"Midnight."
"You're welcome to wait in the public area, but I can't guarantee she'll have time to talk to you." I found a seat in the corner of the waiting room, hood pulled up, mask in place, and settled in to wait. Around me, Portland's Friday night casualties cycled through: drunken college students with twisted ankles, elderly people with chest pains, parents with feverish children. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. At 10:23 p.m., I saw her. Sarah walked past the waiting room, heading toward the nurse's station with a tablet in her hands. Even exhausted, even in shapeless scrubs with her hair pulled back in a messy bun, she was beautiful. She was focused on whatever was on her screen, her expression serious and professional. I stood up before I could talk myself out of it.
"Sarah."
She looked up, her eyes scanning the waiting room. When they landed on me, I saw a flash of recognition followed immediately by something that looked like anger and hurt mixed together into something volatile. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," she said, her voice low and dangerous.
"I know.
I just need 5 minutes to explain."
"Explain."
She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Explain what, exactly? How you've been lying to me for a month. How you served me coffee every morning with this innocent act while you knew exactly who I was."
"It wasn't an act.
"Sarah, everything I felt, everything we talked about, that was real."
"Real."
She stepped closer, and I could see the fury blazing in her dark eyes. "You want to talk about what's real?
Fine.
Let's talk about how I told you. I told Ethan Mitchell, the poor struggling barista, about my student loans. About how I was worried I'd never be able to afford to have kids because of the debt. Do you know how that feels now? Knowing I was pouring my heart out to someone who could write a check for my entire debt without even noticing the money. I never wanted to make you feel." "You never wanted?" Her voice rose, and several people in the waiting room turned to look. She took a breath, clearly trying to regain control. "Ethan, you had everything. Everything I've been working my entire life to achieve, everything I've sacrificed for. You had it and you just walked away from it. Like it was nothing. Like it meant nothing." "It didn't mean nothing.
It meant too much. Don't you see?"
I couldn't breathe under all that weight. I needed to know who I was without it. "And you couldn't do that without lying to me? Without making a fool of me?" "I never meant to make you feel foolish. I pulled down my mask, needing her to see my face, to see the sincerity there. When you walked into that coffee shop, I panicked. I knew if you recognized me, the whole thing would fall apart. But then you didn't recognize me, and I thought maybe I could just be Ethan Mitchell around you. Be the person I was trying to become." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but the hurt was still there, raw and fresh.
"You want to know the worst part?
I liked you.
Ethan Mitchell, I mean.
He was kind and humble and real.
He listened to me.
He saw me as just Sarah, not Sarah Chun, the nurse with the impressive family, not Marcus's little sister, not anyone's anything. Just me." "I still see you that way," I said desperately.
"That part wasn't fake, Sarah."
"None of it was fake." "But it wasn't real either, was it? Because Ethan Mitchell doesn't exist. He's just another character you were playing, another role in your little experiment." She shook her head, and I saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. "You know what hurts the most? When we were together before, when we dated 2 years ago, I broke up with you because I didn't know if you could ever see me as an equal. If you could ever separate yourself from your privilege enough to really connect with someone like me." "I remember," I said quietly. "And then you show up in Portland pretending to be poor, pretending to be normal, and I thought, God, I actually thought, maybe this is fate's way of giving us a second chance. Maybe I could fall for the real Ethan Montgomery, the one underneath all the money and the name. She wiped roughly at her eyes. But you're not real, are you? You're just a rich kid playing dress-up, and I'm the idiot who fell for it twice.
Sarah. Nurse Chun.
Another nurse called from down the hallway. We need you in room 4 stat. Sarah looked back at me one last time, and the expression on her face broke something inside me.
Don't come here again, Ethan.
Don't call me, don't text me, don't send Marcus to apologize for you. Whatever this was, whatever you thought this was, it's over. It was over before it even started. She turned and walked away, and I stood frozen in the middle of the emergency room waiting area, watching the woman I loved disappear around a corner. Someone nearby whispered, "Hey, isn't that the Montgomery kid? The one who went missing?" I pulled my hood back up and left before anyone could take a photo.
3 days later.